Good afternoon, everyone. We're excited for today's webinar, Crawl, Walk, Run, which is a staged approach to developing a successful CRM strategy. My name is Misty Mullenbach, and I'm the Director of Client Success. As part of my role at Enrollment Rx, I engage with our clients and many of you on a monthly or quarterly basis. I am 100% client-centric, and I lead all engagements once your implementation is complete. My goal is to assist you with getting the most out of your Enrollment Rx product. We want to welcome you to our first RAD webinar here at Enrollment Rx. Our RAD solution focuses on recruitment, admissions, and decisions. Many of you have worked with our speaker today on your implementation projects. We have Kathy Koh-Gigante. Kathy is our Director of Implementation and has been with Enrollment Rx for 8 years. She comes from several years in the higher education realm of things focused on admissions. Kathy is a hockey and baseball mom. She is a big fan of traveling, road trips, long scenic drives, and duck boat tours. And if you want to know what her dream job is, it's to be an RV transporter. If you have any questions as we go through the presentation, please add them to the questions box and we will save time to review your questions at the end. And now I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Kathy. Welcome, Kathy.
Thanks, Misty. Thank you, everybody who's on the call. I would like to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy day to join me in this webinar. As you can see from the title of the slide, it's described as a staged approach to developing a successful CRM strategy. And so if any of you have worked with me in the past, you will know that I have called this approach a crawl, walk, run strategy. And I certainly didn't trademark this term, but I have used this approach as a way to help clients think about how to bucket priorities in preparation for an implementation. And another way to think about these buckets of priorities is what are your immediate must-haves, your near-term must-haves, and your nice-to-haves. But sometimes to even get to the point where you can begin bucketing your needs, sometimes you need to step back and actually figure out what are my actual needs. So I can't bucket them if I don't know what they are. So what I hope to do today is provide a very simple framework for you to use to either come up with a strategy to implement a CRM for those of you who are new to the CRM world, or if you're one of our existing clients, hopefully this will provide a framework for you to kind of reevaluate your existing CRM strategy. In reviewing the attendee list, I can see that this audience is in many different stages of the CRM process, and perhaps you're here for different reasons. So who is the right audience for this webinar? My hope is that there is information that will resonate with everyone, regardless of what stage of the CRM process you're in. So for those of you who are not existing clients, perhaps this webinar will help jumpstart or facilitate your CRM search. For those of you who are just starting or are actually in the middle of an existing Enrollment Rx implementation, my hope is that this webinar will provide a framework to facilitate a successful implementation and go live. Some of you are existing clients and already had a well-documented strategy before we even began. And if that is the case, then maybe now is a good time to evaluate the alignment of your implementation outcomes with your original implementation goals. So in other words, is this CRM system meeting your original goals? And then also for our existing clients, perhaps you can use this information as you think about sub-strategies. So for example, perhaps creating a 1 to 3 year strategic plan as part of a short-term COVID admission strategy. So basically, I hope there's a little bit of something for everyone. So regardless of where you are in the process or your purpose, I think the first thing I would suggest doing is to step back and assess the current landscape. Get a clear and realistic picture of the monetary and staffing resources that you have available to dedicate to your CRM project or your overall CRM strategy. And then once you assess the landscape, the next question to ask yourself is, one, do I create a plan or strategy based on what resources I have available today? Or do I create a plan and strategy based on the ideal future state? So why is this important? You could have the best laid out plan, the most comprehensive, thoroughly documented strategic process in mind. But if you don't have or won't get the monetary and staffing resources to work on your plan, then it's unfortunately just ideas on paper. So in a scenario like this, you may need to actually scale back and create a strategy based on what options you actually have available today. However, if you're in a situation where a comprehensive documented plan is needed to justify getting the additional resources you may need, then in this scenario, you may have more leeway to kind of, shoot for the skies. You could aim high knowing that you may have to give a little bit in the end. So once you determine if you're going to go with what you have or try to go with what you will eventually need, then you have to find out the following. So number one, who's available? What functions do you need for your strategy? For example, is your strategy focused on improving business processes and the applicant user experience? If yes, then do you have functional users available? Does your strategy also incorporate communications such as emails or texts, or perhaps creating new content on your website or on your portal homepage? If that's the case, then is your marketing and communications team available, or your web team? Do your goals also require technical expertise? Do you want to improve existing integrations? Do you plan on adding new integrations? If yes, is your IT team available? So basically think about who are the players or what are the skill sets that are needed for each part of your strategy, and then does your strategic implementation coincide with their actual availability? Of the staff that you have identified as a need, you should also evaluate what is their existing technical skill set, what is their knowledge base, what's their knowledge of Salesforce. So more specifically, are there any technical or skills gap in your staff compared to what you need to achieve your goals? And if the existing skill sets are lacking, then what are your options? So one, will you need again to scale back or adjust your strategy based on the existing skill sets available today? Or is there an opportunity to hire or contract temporary resources with the needed skill sets? Or can you perhaps provide a window of time for your existing staff to train up to become effective contributors? So basically, consider if you need to adjust your plan, hire new staff, or allow adequate time for staff to receive the training they need. Now, if you're an existing client, you may want to use this as an opportunity to reassess how are you currently using Salesforce and Enrollment Rx today, and how do you want to use it going forward? Another way to think about this for existing clients is, do you wish to scale or do you wish to stay where you are and improve? So for new clients, think about how you wish to use Salesforce enrollment day one, year one, okay? So for newcomers, I would say a simple starting point is, do you want to think about if you want your implementation in Salesforce to be a standalone system just for recruiting and admissions and decisions, or RAD? Or do you wish to have other departments using Salesforce? So what's the scope of the initial project? Who's going to be involved? For existing clients that are using Salesforce Enrollment Rx just for RAD, is your goal to begin scaling and have others use Salesforce? Or is now the time to perhaps bring in data and users from your other departments, such as maybe financial aid, housing, student affairs as examples? Or is your goal to stick to what you have for your current users, but just make it better, more efficient, more effective? Another thing to consider is, who is your audience? Take the time to evaluate your target audience. So if you're an existing client, do you want to stay focused on inquiries through applicant if that's been your focus so far? If yes, do you perhaps have new priorities, new targeted populations for this upcoming year? So as an example, you might decide that you still want to focus on inquiries through decision applicants, but perhaps upon reviewing your numbers, reviewing reports, doing some analysis, you might realize that you need to focus more on certain populations. Do you need to bring in more new inquiries? Or perhaps you don't need more inquiries, you just need more qualified inquiries. Or maybe you have enough inquiries, but the challenge is increasing the conversion to get them to start your app. Maybe you're getting people to start the app, but they're not completing the app. Maybe they're completing the app, but you're too slow to provide a decision. Or maybe you were quick to provide that admit decision, but they still didn't come. So in other words, take the time to evaluate what is happening now to determine where you should focus going forward. Another thing to consider is, do you want to start expanding your current target audience? Is now the time to focus on perhaps new recruiting populations? Is now the time to start focusing on parents, especially during this time of COVID? I'm sure that many of you have found a greater need to communicate with your parents regarding upcoming policies and changes. Do you want to start communicating with alumni, businesses, high schools and high school counselors? So basically, to summarize this slide, as an important first step, I would suggest taking time to evaluate your current landscape with regards to your resource availability, your required skill sets, how you want to use the system, and who you want to target. So this slide is meant to provide a very simple suggestion on how to facilitate brainstorming sessions to either come up with a list of new goals or perhaps to reevaluate existing goals. There are many existing frameworks that exist that you can follow as part of a strategic planning process. But for those of you who find this process overwhelming, or you just want a simple place to start, or perhaps you want a simple way to convey your goals to others, whether it be verbally or in formal presentations going forward, I can think of no easier process than starting with a bucket for your internal goals versus external goals. So what do I mean by internal versus external? To me, internal goals is about getting everything into Salesforce, becoming as efficient as possible with your business processes, and improving your staff's day-to-day work experience. So how do you do this? This means evaluating your existing processes, identifying the pain points, and eventually creating more efficient processes. Identify all those secret spreadsheets. Continue to try to get buy-in to pry away those beloved spreadsheets from your staff. Try to get them to trust you and the process that they're responsible for will not fail if we transfer the data from Excel to Salesforce. Figure out who on your staff has all the processes, the procedures, institutional knowledge stored in their memory, and how do you find a way to gently extract that information from brain to Salesforce. Another way that I think about internal goals is anything that I can do for those staff members who will be using Salesforce extensively. So who will be sitting in front of those screens day in and day out. What can I do to make their jobs easier, better, more enjoyable, less stressful, less annoying, so they can feel more engaged and fulfilled? What can I do to make my staff happy and improve the quality of their work? External goals, I think simply put, covers anything that deals with the experience for your external audiences. Goals can include how can you improve or extend outreach with your external audience? How can I continue to improve the user experience when it comes to visiting my website, filling out forms, finding forms, filling out the application, uploading documents? Not only do I want to improve the user experience, but are there strategies that I can employ to make them engage with us more versus us always reaching out to them? And to do so, what are the calls to action you want your audience to take to try to draw them in? Is the call to action to open a particular link in an email? Are you trying to get them to sign up for a visit? Do you want them to start your application? Try to get them to set up an appointment with a counselor? or perhaps just trying to have them visit your homepage to monitor their requirements, to read new content, and just stay engaged. So for simplicity's sake, in this slide, I've categorized the crawl stage of just things to do to get organized internally. So keep in mind that as I review the following slides, when I talk about the crawl phase versus the walk phase, just know that one school's crawl phase may be another school's walk phase and vice versa. And in reality, no implementation strategy is as simple of a framework as I'm providing. This is really meant to just provide a simple visual for you to think about how you yourself would categorize or bucket your own priorities to meet your own strategy. So with that, let's begin. Prioritize. So for those of you that are new to the CRM game, this is a great opportunity to figure out, what does your team actually do? What do they do? How do they do it? Why do they do things the way they do today? What are their main pain points? What suggestions might they have for improvement? And what is their wish list of things that could be different in a new system? For those of you who have actually gone through an implementation, this is an opportunity to stop and evaluate, how has their job changed? What do they do now post-implementation? And what is better about their job today? What still isn't working for your staff? What can be done better now? And what suggestions do they have for improvement? For those that are daily users, that are in the trenches, I think it is vitally important to get a temperature check on their experience, their adoption, satisfaction, responds with a particular response. You can create a task for a follow-up. Or based on another response, you could send an email and provide more information. You could use Process Builder and create a new checklist requirement item and then display and track that item on the portal. Or maybe you don't track it on the portal, but you track it internally on the back end where the application won't see it, but you as a staff member can continue to track any additional information you may need as part of your COVID changes. Okay. The reason why I'm kind of using COVID as an example is that recently I have logged into a couple different clients' orgs just to do some quick troubleshooting. And, I've noticed that there are new questions, new sections on their page layout that are very specific to COVID. I've seen on clients' homepages, giant forms for information to collect as additional information is needed regarding their COVID policies. So, with that in mind, that's why I'm trying to throw out maybe some ideas for some immediate strategies or immediate ways in which you can employ some of this functionality. Okay. Customize. Now might be a good time to review and just make sure that your org meets your institutional security policies, right? Every client has their own customized requirements. So perhaps review all your profiles, your roles, and your permissions. Is now a time to reevaluate and make updates to your existing security structure? Now that folks are using Salesforce, do you trust staff to perhaps add more administrative permissions? Perhaps start playing around with permission sets so you can better customize that additional access for your star performers or your quick learners. Visualize. Think about the type of reports you will need. I think it's really important to make Trailhead modules a priority. Trailhead is Salesforce's learning management tool. Because throughout your use of Salesforce, you will undoubtedly be asked, was this investment worth it? What's our return on investment? And the only way you're going to be able to provide that information is through reporting. So I would say certainly, take the time to make reporting Trailhead modules a priority as you learn more about Salesforce functionality. But also keep in mind that it's very easy to get both enamored and overwhelmed with all the bells and whistles that come with Salesforce reports and dashboards. So if you're new or kind of newer to the reporting world in Salesforce, I suggest, start simple and slow and work your way up in complexity over time. Standardize and strategize. So you want all your data captured in Salesforce. And let's say you're an existing client and you've successfully gotten rid of all those secret spreadsheets. You're tracking now all your phone calls and interactions with applicants in Salesforce. You've hopefully been communicating through Salesforce, whether through transactional emails sent through Salesforce, or perhaps more marketing nurturing emails sent through your email marketing tools such as Pardot or Marketing Cloud, or other email marketing tools that may have integration with Salesforce. So now that you have all this data, what do you do with it now? And this is the opportunity to think about what you want to track. Ask yourself, again, what list views can you now create now that you have this data to make your staff's jobs easier? What types of reports can you create? And again, think about the bucketing of those reports. What types of reports? What reporting buckets make sense for your institution? Do you need staff productivity reports? Do you need management reports? Or do you need daily processing related reports? Diversify. You don't have to go through all this alone. Certainly take advantage of all the resources available to you, both for Salesforce and for Enrollment Rx. As you can see here, you can join the user groups, Trailhead for Salesforce learning modules, the Power of Us Hub, where you can connect with other Enrollment Rx users, Building on the Best, which is our Enrollment Rx conference, the Higher Ed Summit through Dreamforce or Salesforce, as well as their Dreamforce conference. On the next slide, these are resources that are specific to Enrollment Rx. As I mentioned before, the Power of Us Hub. We have amazing library of videos, short training videos, webinar recordings. We have very helpful user guides for all our products. And we also have come up with some suggested trail mixes for beginning admins, advanced, Pardot users, and end users. What we try to do is take from the Salesforce admin certification modules and picked out the ones that we felt would be immediately applicable to your implementation. Okay. So in the previous slide, I categorized the crawl stage as trying to get organized internally. In this slide, I've described the walk stage as strategies that deal with shifting your focus to external audiences. So any strategies that deal with ways in which you reach out to your constituents or other areas or departments within your actual college or university. So obviously, it's important to continue to communicate. Now's the time to establish or evaluate your existing communication strategy. And I believe now more than ever, this is a crucial part of your overall CRM strategy. So continue to ask, what is the purpose of all your communications? Particularly during these days, you may be thinking of communications to serve different purposes. Are you trying to nurture? So are you generating and maintaining interest? Or are you trying to elicit some kind of call to action? As an example, are you trying to get people to turn in a form, register for an orientation, pay a deposit, fill out something for you? Are you trying to merely inform and update? I am sure all of you have had to keep students and parents informed of all the COVID-related processes and changes. And perhaps you're just also trying to provide a level of comfort and a sense of safety and security during these unsettling times, particularly for your incoming freshmen. So once you've identified the ways in which you wish to communicate, identify the priorities. What is the cadence of these different types of communications? When is it too much? When is it not enough? And remember, they're not just receiving communications from your institution, they're probably receiving communications from many institutions. Does your current email tool actually meet your current needs? Does your existing email tool have integration with Salesforce? If not, is now the time to evaluate and switch to a third-party email tool that has Salesforce integration? In addition to emails, what are other forms of communication that is best served for different purposes? So for example, when does it make sense to use text messaging instead of emails? When you're sending emails, are they transactional? Are they marketing and nurturing? Or again, is it a call to action? Do you need to start making use of calling campaigns? And if yes, be sure to record all that information in Salesforce. Also, based on the responses from those conversations, perhaps you could update certain questions, certain fields that would automatically trigger a follow-up email, or perhaps a task to the owner of that particular contact or application. Another important thing is just to continue to evaluate. So as I mentioned earlier during the crawl stage, I mentioned the importance of tracking all important data in Salesforce, whether it's, spreadsheets, sticky notes, things that it's in the institutional memories of your staff. But now that this data is in the system, try to track the metrics on your various outreach opportunities and activities. Are you using an email tool that allows you to track and measure engagement? Are applicants using your homepage and portal to track and upload requirements and stay engaged with your school? Are applications actually responding to your calls to action? Are they registering for your webinars or virtual visits that you may have instituted? Remediate. Take my suggestion is every anniversary of your go live, use that as an opportunity to kind of pause, reset, evaluate, and identify how are things going. It's like getting your annual physical, time to take a temperature check on your CRM usage and engagement. So I think a good starting point is review your initial getting started document that you filled out at the beginning of our implementation and identify if there are gaps between what you hope to achieve compared to where you are today. And identify how those gaps can be addressed. Can it be addressed through greater use of Salesforce functionality? Could it be addressed through greater use of Enrollment Rx products, particularly as new functionality is introduced with each release? Or perhaps you might need a third-party app to fill in some of those gaps. Facilitate. For those that are still in Salesforce Classic, now might be the time to switch to Lightning Experience. Integrate. If applicable, define your integration strategy, or if existing clients, review and enhance what's been done so far. Think about what are all the integration points that you may want or may have now and may wish to expand. Are there additional integrations that you wish to implement? Is there a more sophisticated integration model that you wish to use? So for example, perhaps you started with a very basic import-export process, and now you may wish to use a more automated direct integration. And appreciate. I would suggest continue to tap into both the ERX and Salesforce community. And at the risk of sounding, completely cheesy, I truly believe that the ERX community is a very special one. For those of you who have attended our Enrollment Rx Building on the Best conferences, I think you would agree that there is a really extraordinary and impressive level of cooperation, camaraderie. I think some general friendships have formed between our participants, and hopefully with some of the ERX team as well. And then with all this kind of assessing and evaluating, I think it's really important to also just to take the time to just congratulate and measure whatever success and celebrate any milestone that has occurred. Especially now, I think it is very easy to be overwhelmed with all the things that you want to do, but perhaps haven't yet been able to do so. And so it is important to celebrate the milestones, every little win, no matter how small it may feel compared to your overall grand plan. Don't forget to think about where you are today compared to where you were before. And, appreciate and take pride in each step that you've taken to get to where you are today. I think it's very important to do. Okay. So I've described the crawl stage as getting organized internally. I've bucketed the walk stage as ways in which you can kind of reach out to your constituents or just reach out to other parts of your institution. And to me, the run stage, it's really just a combination of both. but at a more advanced level, and this is really more at a customized level to what you need. It's about honing and improving those items that you've identified in the crawl and walk stage, and perhaps finding even more ways to get your constituents to come to you. So, find ways in which you can get them to engage. I think I've given examples in the previous stage or in the previous slides, but so much of our, I think, efforts are always thinking about sharing information, reaching out, going to them. Don't forget about finding ways to get them to come to you. When I say getting laser focused, again, this is just assessing any of the gaps, any areas of improvement. This is the opportunity to continue to just build on what you've done year after year. When I say specialize, this means just really, is there other Salesforce or Enrollment Rx functionality that you haven't yet explored that is now a good time to try? So for example, using events and visits to its fullest capabilities to try to get folks to come on campus. Or until they're even able to come on campus, try to engage them in virtual opportunities. Perhaps use Form Builder to create those forms to collect information vital to the application process or to follow up with them for certain areas. Now it might be a time to start working towards your certifications. Use Trailhead to gain new skills, work towards certifications for your platform, for your data model or industry specifically. Take advantage of our webinars and videos and help guides. Consider for your certifications, I think there's two that is applicable to our clients. One is the Salesforce admin certification. And then for those of you who do much more heavy lifting and a lot of configuration, there's also the platform app builder. And then also think about, is now the time to scale? Strategize if you want to expand the use of Salesforce to other parts of your campus. Maybe it's taking your existing recruitment, admissions, and decisions functionality and just expanding it to other departments or other schools at your institution if that hasn't been done already. Start thinking about how you want to grow and scale and identify, well, what is it going to take to get there? So begin that process of identifying how you're going to scale if that's your goal. Will you do this internally? Will your team do the development and the additional configurations to grow? Or can you make use of any plug-and-play third-party apps to help with this? Will you continue to use managed package apps and their associated implementation processes? Or perhaps you may choose to hire a consultant, or if an Enrollment Rx client, perhaps additional hours to work on a particular project. This is really my final slide, and this slide is, I call this a collection of my personal random tips and suggestions. I think implementing and using Salesforce and Enrollment Rx can be very exciting and very rewarding. But I recognize that trying to constantly stay on top of all the new features and all the functionality and all the releases can be a lot of information to digest. And so these are tips that I hope may help alleviate some of that stress or anxiety you may sometimes feel when it comes to expanding the use of your CRM. Some of these tips may be a little controversial, so I'm going to include the caveat that one often hears, which is these are the opinions of Kathy Koh only and may not reflect the opinions of Salesforce or Enrollment Rx. And so with that, let's start. So Trailhead, friend or foe? As many of you know, Trailhead is, I think, a really amazing online learning tool. You can easily learn Salesforce functionality. I think it's a very fun and engaging way to do so. One of the greatest benefits is the vast amount of information. It's free, it's easy to digest, and it's easily accessible. But one of the cons to me of Trailhead, in my personal opinion, is the fact that there's a vast amount of information that is free, easy to digest, and easily accessible. So for the new or uninitiated, it is easy to get overwhelmed with all the modules that are available, all the certification trails, all the specialized trail mixes, all the emails from Salesforce highlighting the newest Trailhead badges that are available. I can't tell you how many Salesforce emails regarding webinars on new releases or regarding links to new badges that I have flagged in my inbox that remain untouched. So if any of you have experienced similar feelings, my advice is to try not to feel compelled that you have to review and master everything new that comes your way. Take a deep breath and be deliberate and focused on how you choose to spend your training time. If you have limited time to spend, don't feel like you have to tackle those long trails. Perhaps start with the units or modules that are immediately applicable to what you need to learn or what you immediately need to apply to your job. And if you focus on what is immediately applicable, and if you continue to tackle a unit here and a unit there, I do think you'll be very surprised at how quickly you can start amassing badges, but more importantly, that you're focusing on the quality of the badges and not the quantity. So for conferences, inspiring or anxiety inducing, and this is really just from my own personal experience. I think the great thing about, the Salesforce and Enrollment Rx community is the opportunity to attend conferences and network with your peers, whether it be that Enrollment Rx Building on the Best conference, Higher Ed, or Dreamforce. And when I first started attending the Salesforce conferences, I remember I was so excited. I was so inspired. I went to tons of workshops. I diligently took notes, and I fully intended to try new things in my implementations. The second year I went to the conferences, I expected to be just as inspired, but instead I realized all the things that I had planned to do from the previous year's conference that I never did. And then by the third year, I realized that I was getting wowed by these workshops with really, the big shiny objects, and focusing on things that were exciting and flashy. And then I realized maybe I should be focusing on things that were more applicable and perhaps just easier to implement. So if you are starting to feel the same sense of just being overwhelmed with ideas that you never have had an opportunity to execute, I think there's nothing wrong with changing your strategy at these conferences. So rather than focus on everything that's new or the latest talk of the town, perhaps spend a year focusing on just making what you already have today work better for you. Certifications. So I'm kind of contradicting myself because earlier I showed you a slide with all these trail mixes, and I'm really talking about, possibly getting your certifications. But I also believe that there's value in learn by playing without having to obsess about those tests. So Salesforce offers the certifications. I mentioned the ones that are most applicable: Salesforce Admin Certification and Platform App Builder. However, I will say that with these two certifications, and there are trail mixes that give you a nice list of modules to master for those certifications. I will say that that within those trail mixes, there are a good number of very time-consuming modules that may not have any relevancy to your jobs or current use of Salesforce and Enrollment Rx. So I say this: so if you don't have the luxury of time to devote a lot of time to study for the certification, then my suggestion is, rather than dig straight into doing all the modules that are recommended, be selective. Start with the units and modules, again, that are directly applicable to your day-to-day. Study them and immediately try to apply them. So if you do a unit on list views, go create some list views. You're brushing up on reports, go create your reports. Creating fields, do it. Focus on the modules that will add value to your staff and to your applicants. And I think that if you follow this strategy, you will naturally learn up to 75% of the material for the test while actually using it for the benefit of your staff and applicants. And then this way, you can just try to carve out time to focus on perhaps that 25% that might just be an exercise of pure memorization in order to pass the test. Avoid analysis paralysis. Start somewhere and just do it. So thoughtful analysis and strategizing at the start of a project is obviously a good and necessary thing. However, if you find you're getting overwhelmed with all the options or you don't know where to start to put together a comprehensive strategy, there's nothing wrong, I think, with just granting yourself some forgiveness and just try to start somewhere. Just start anywhere. Sometimes, starting with small and tackling, a few items here and there can help boost that momentum. That you need to kind of keep going. Taking some time to just do and play rather than overthink may actually help inspire or spark that thought process. And yeah, work smarter and not harder. Again, a top-down strategy can be a good thing, but sometimes there can be big, quick, and easy wins just by tackling the low-hanging fruit. So maybe one bucket as part of your crawl, walk, run strategy is a bucket on low-hanging fruit. What are 5 quick wins that will make life for my staff easier and allow them to be more efficient? What are 5 quick wins that will make the user experience better? You'd be surprised at how life-changing and transformative it can be for your staff to just create a field, create a view, add just that one extra column to report on a report, get rid of some sections on a page layout because the scrolling can be tedious. For your applicants, if they keep calling and asking the same questions, is there an easy way to address these questions? If many are getting stuck on a particular page in the portal, or if they're constantly answering a question incorrectly, do you just need to add some instructive text to the portal? If applicants are uploading incorrect documents, do you just need to rename the checklist requirement name because it's confusing? For other types of frequently asked questions, would one simple email communication solve the problem? Or would an explanation on one of your homepage widgets help clarify? Would an FAQ link on your homepage alleviate calls to the office? Train each other. Don't feel like you have to be responsible for all the training. Perhaps you can get some of your super users or those that have been really quick to learn and adapt to get engaged in training. Task them to learn certain units and modules and come up with ideas, and perhaps meet periodically to train each other, brainstorm, and to train other staff members. Spend wisely. If budgets are tight or if you're experiencing, conference fatigue, maybe take a year to reallocate some of those financial resources. And I think this suggestion comes very naturally this year because any money allocated to attending conferences could potentially be reallocated. So maybe think about hiring an intern with Salesforce knowledge to work on a project to solve an immediate need you have. Maybe look into purchasing an app on the App Exchange to fill in the gaps in your day-to-day process. If you have a business school, are there any students with Salesforce knowledge that could work on a student project, perhaps for credit? And then finally, show them the money. Stockpile your arsenal. I think it's always important to continually, experiment and play with creating a variety of reports to show that your investment is producing results. Management will always want to see quantifiable results. They'll want to see the numbers and the dollars and cents. However, don't forget the intangibles. Don't forget about the quality of life enhancements that may not show up in the data. So perhaps start collecting quotes from your staff on what they like about the new system, how it changed or improved the quality of their work. If you do surveys on the incoming class, perhaps include a couple questions about the application experience. Once prospective students start visiting campus again, perhaps send them a survey. Consider documenting any positive feedback you receive that's a result of your CRM implementation. So with that, this brings my presentation to an end. I know that because you are all in different stages, that this presentation doesn't fully meet any one person's needs. For those of you who may be like skilled or seasoned implementation strategists, I do apologize if this information was too basic. And for those of you who are just starting or feeling overwhelmed, I hope I didn't make things worse by overloading you with even more questions to consider. My hope was that for each of you that, there were points or suggestions that resonated with you. My hope is that you were able to take away a few tidbits or suggestions to create and structure your own framework on how to create your own crawl, walk, run strategy, whether it be at the start of your CRM search or during your yearly evaluation of how things are going. So again, I thank you for your time. For those of you who have not implemented a CRM system yet, I hope this served useful as you prioritize your upcoming needs. For those of you who are our clients, we sincerely thank you for entrusting us as your partner. And with that, I will turn it over to Misty, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thanks, Kathy. So as an admin, what are your suggestions on managing internal expectations?
On managing internal expectations. Okay, so that could be internal expectations of those that are using the system, as well as internal expectation from a broader audience, maybe from kind of those that were the sponsors of the project, things like that. So when it comes to those that are using the system, I think it's very important to kind of take a pulse of how people are feeling, to recognize and acknowledge that people might be nervous, that people might be afraid of change, that people might be afraid of losing their jobs, that people might feel like, I'm overwhelmed already. I'm now dealing with all these COVID-related processes, and now I'm also on top of that have to deal with an implementation. So I think it's important to get a feel for this, and acknowledgement, I think, is very, very important early in the process. You want to acknowledge the current state, you want to acknowledge how they feel, but then you want to show them what are the possible ways in which a new CRM system can make things better. And another way to, I think, do that is to work on engagement, get their feedback. You know, I had mentioned previously about asking them what they do right, what are their suggestions, what would be their wish list in a new system, and try to keep them engaged. You know, show them perhaps, if appropriate, maybe little snippets here and there of things that will come to play and how those little pieces might make their jobs easier. But additionally, I think it's important to be honest. Let them know that, you know, after implementation, expect that things might be a little busy, things might be a little rocky, things won't be perfect, and to just expect that and have a process set up for them to be able to convey if something isn't working. You want to have that process established right away. And you know, take the time to address their concerns. Again, like I mentioned before, you can so easily change someone's experience and help them feel like they're being heard by acknowledging some simple suggestion that they might have that may take very little time on your part to make. And then with a greater audience, I think it's just important to always keep them abreast of how the project is going. And, you know, being honest, it's very fluid, particularly now with so many things going on. I think that for the projects we're working on, everyone is being very forgiving and understanding of that situation. And so making sure your executive sponsors know what's happening. And as I mentioned, to manage expectations, make sure you have that set of reports that you can show hopefully some of the benefits and improvements and the return on investment.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy. Looks like we have just one more question as of right now, and that is, do you have any tips or tricks for someone looking to take a certification exam?
Yes, so I would definitely say Salesforce has some great modules specific to how you, specific to each certification exam. So I think that is a great starting point. There are some really nice resources, and unfortunately I don't remember offhand, but we can certainly include that, I think, on a slide, of additional resources that are widely used outside of Trailhead to prepare for those certification examinations. But as I mentioned, you know, I think the best way to do it, in my opinion, is to focus on the things that you need for your job And to give yourself time to learn Salesforce. I know for that certification exam, I think they even recommended that you would have been using Salesforce for 6 months or something like that. So take the time to focus on those units and modules that you're going to immediately use for your job, that's going to immediately enhance the experience of your users. And by tackling things that are immediately applicable, that's going to leave a smaller, percentage of information that you're going to just have to study, like I said, just by pure memorization.
Awesome. All right, it looks like that might be all the questions for today. So Kathy, we thank you for sharing your expertise and going through this with everybody. We definitely look forward to having everyone join future RAD and Trail Talks. So have a great week and stay healthy, everybody. Thank you for joining us.